Hola, buenas tardes a todos y todas. Soy Nicolás Leonard, Managing Director de Thiga y cofundador de AbreConf. Para todos los que acaban de entrar en esta conferencia y día entero de charlas que tenemos sobre producto digital, me gustaría agradecer a Itamar Gilad, que es nuestro próximo ponente en este escenario de Think Different. Y antes de darle todo el espacio y el tiempo para presentar su charla, me gustaría hacer una presentación muy breve de su viaje profesional en 3 etapas. Empezó como ingeniero de software en IBM, luego pasó por el mundo de producto, más de 15 años trabajando en equipos de producto en startups como grandes empresas, Microsoft y luego Google. En su tiempo en Google, durante 6 años, trabajando en productos tan exitosos y famosos como Gmail. Y ahora mismo Itamar se está dedicando al 100% de su tiempo como coach y experto de producto, acompañando a empresas y equipos de producto para que tengan mucho más impacto en lo que ofrecen a sus usuarios. Así que muchísimas gracias, Itamar, por tu tiempo. Nos hemos conocido por artículos Medium, luego coincidiendo en conferencias en Zurich de Project Management Festival, y ahora mismo es un honor y con muchísimo placer de tenerte con la PreConf Madrid, LPC y 2020. Así que vamos. Te dejo la palabra. Thanks a lot, Itamar. That's yours.
Muchas gracias. I understood most of it. I wish I could do this in Spanish, but I'll go with English.
Next year.
Exactly. All right. So I want to tell you why product management requires actually changing the system, changing your company, your organization from the inside. And there'll be 3 parts to this. First, I will explain to you why hiring PM is great, but it's not enough. It requires this system change, and the 2 other parts will be about what the system change is and how we can drive it. So let's start with the top. And the good news is there's huge demand. I went the other day to LinkedIn, and I just typed product management, and I got over almost 1,500 openings, positions in Spain, and over 47,000 in the European Union. So this is great news. We are in high demand. As someone who's done product management for 15 years and has been coaching product management for a few years, I'm very pleased with this trend. It's really high time that product management will be embraced in Europe. However, a lot of times when companies hire product managers, the results are not exactly what they expect. They're a bit disappointing, the results that we can get, and I'll try to explain why. Let's go back in time. Let's say the middle of the 20th century and a completely different type of product. Let's say a can of baked beans. How would you manage, how would you launch a product like that? So for one thing, this sort of product has a very predictable market. You know how many baked beans are sold. There's probably statistics about it. You know who's buying them. You can segment the market very easily. You also know who you're competing against. There's probably just a few incumbent players that you need to compete against. And that also means that the product you will launch will probably exactly the same as everyone else's. You will innovate maybe on what you put on the packaging, how you market it, how you sell it, but the product itself, there's not a lot of room for innovation. The means of productions are very predictable as well. Canned goods, canned foods probably have been around for a while. The technology is not evolving very fast. And the business model is predictable as well. So you know how you sell it, you know what your costs will be, who you will partner with. So this is, I would say, a highly predictable product in a predictable market. And that's kind of the origins of product management in a sense. How would you manage a product like this? So maybe you start with some focus group, maybe you do some research, but then really it's a matter of management to decide. And actually, managers and committees are in a good position to decide on these things based on the experience, because probably they launched similar products in the past, and they can give the green light to this project. And then it's a matter of creating plans. Maybe it's a product line. Maybe there's a few launches coming in the pipeline. And then you can create projections around these launches. And then you can give it basically to execution, to the development, to the engineering, to the manufacturing, and to the sales and marketing teams to actually execute on the plans and the projections. So this is a time-old system that has worked for many products. Let's think about our world. We're developing tech products using software. Is there any difference? I would argue there's a huge difference. For one thing, the market is not predictable anymore. Since we have software and the internet, a lot of the barriers for entry have been removed. So we're no longer just competing against a handful of incumbent players, we're competing against two guys in a garage, or another product that somehow serves the same needs. And the customers and users have a huge selection of choice. They can really pick and choose what they want, and you really need to give them a lot of value in order to move from one to the other. You can't just influence them by launching the same product, just a little bit better, just a little bit cheaper, and then throwing a lot of money at marketing and sales. That has stopped working completely. So the product itself needs to be innovative, and it's really hard to know what will move the needle. The means of production, unfortunately, is also quite unreliable. We're using software, and software has the nasty habit of taking much longer to develop than we expect, delivering something that we don't expect, or a lot of side effects that we don't expect, and also creating a lot of bugs. And also the business model is something we can iterate around. There's more than one business model, and we can change it and also change the product. So there's some variability there as well. So you would expect that for a product like this, we would use a completely different system, but we don't. We are actually trying to force the same model on tech products. We start by planning, we plan the strategy, we plan the roadmap, we plan the project, and then we move into execution. So there's definitely a planning phase and an execution phase. And execution is agile, which is great. I really like agile development, but nothing in this picture is agile. Any change at the top of strategy will cause a huge ripple effect of replanning. If you discover, for example, that one of the products you put into the roadmap or one of the features is actually not a good idea, and you try to pull it out of the roadmap, everyone will be really annoyed with you because the business stakeholders already expect it. Maybe they promised it to the customers. Maybe there's projections around it. So there's no agility. Another problem here is that it kind of divides the company into two. There's the ones that are very focused on the plan, on the long term, on the business goals, and they really expect the plans to come together and for things to ship according to the roadmap and to the products to have the impact that is expected. And there are the people that are involved with execution, they are now very focused on launching small increments of code into production in a very rapid pace. And sometimes they don't know about the bigger plan, or they don't care about it. They don't really realize what are the business goals because we don't tell them. So there's a big disconnect between these two groups. And this is exactly where we put product managers, right there in the middle. And the product manager, in the perception of a lot of companies, is a person that's supposed to make all of this work. They're supposed to deliver on the roadmap, all the strategy, all the product ideas that are sometimes given to them. They don't even are involved in deciding on them. Kind of like a project manager, if you like. And with the developers, they're actually product owners, if you want to use a Scrum term. They're responsible for feeding the agile machine with requirements in the form of user stories and epics, and just getting the insatiable agile machine keep churning out code in quick iterations. And it's really not a very easy job to be squashed in the middle in between these two worlds and satisfying everything. Doesn't give us a lot of time to talk to customers, to think about the long term, to do all sorts of research that are really required in order for us to build the right product. So a lot of product managers find themselves in the middle, and they're very busy, and they're kind of unhappy, and the company is kind of feeling also that product management is not doing its job. So what do we do about this? I'm going to give you a few principles that I think we should embrace, and I'm pretty sure none of this will be shocking for you. These are well-known principles. They're just very hard for companies to embrace. So let's go over them, and later I'll give you some tools how to do the change. The first thing is, almost every company I work with is either sales-driven, so it's very, very focused on the sales numbers, the revenue, the profits, the number of paying customers, or they are product-focused. And then it's really about launching kick-ass products, the best products possible, highest quality, best design. I put there a picture of a product I actually worked on in Microsoft back in the early 2000s. And it was an enterprise product, and we just worked for 2 years, more or less, to create this thing that was almost completely free of bugs. It was well designed, and we just had to burn it into a DVD and ship it to the customers. So it was crucial for us to build a good, high-quality product. Unfortunately, both of these approaches don't work today in the world of high uncertainty. They actually detract us from the main thing. And the main thing today is satisfying the customers, to deliver high value to them. And if we do this, it has a lot of positive impacts on the organization at large. First off, it's something that the entire organization can align around, because everyone understands why customer value is important. Second, it's something that gives a mission to everyone. So the product teams are no longer just focusing on building the best product, but thinking of the product as a vehicle of value delivery. And the business teams realized, and they know this today, if you ask them, that the best way for them to grow the business is to deliver more value to the customers. The other thing I think we should throw away completely is choosing product ideas based on opinions and consensus and politics and pitching and all these things. They don't work. In a world of high uncertainty, these are very unscientific methods. And I think we should move to evidence. Here's an example on the right. If you don't know it, there's a company called Buffer that helps people publish into social networks. Even before they created the product, they already launched a smoke test, a fake landing page, and very easily they learned whether or not there is demand for this product and how much they can charge for it. And that's a perfect example of evidence-driven development. Next, we should move from rigid planning execution, especially roadmaps, into agile. And agile doesn't just mean agile development. Absolutely not. That's an important part, but it also means build, measure, learn. It also means considering a lot of ideas in parallel. And lastly, we should stop thinking of our delivery team on our product teams, on development as a delivery team. As people in a production line, they don't have a lot of opinions or knowledge. We just tell them what to do, and they're supposed to do it as fast as possible, as efficiently as possible. Instead, we need to turn them into product teams. Product teams are given business goals and are allowed to make business decisions. And I realize this requires change both in management and also in the team itself, because not everyone wants to do this out front. But I will give you some tools how to make this change. So these are the 4 principles that I think we should strive for. Let's talk a bit about tools you can use right now to start implementing the change. So there are a lot of frameworks out there, and they're good. This is the one I like the most. This is the one I started using kind of by mistake in Google, and then I kind of started coaching and teaching it, and it's the subject of my book that is coming up. So basically, GIST stands for goals, ideas, steps, and tasks. And goals are simply stating what we're trying to achieve. Ideas are project or solutions, if you like, how to achieve the goal, but we need to embrace the fact that there's always more than one option. So it's not just the one idea that we locked onto, there's actually multiple. Steps are ways to validate and develop the idea. So we build the idea through short projects, then we reach a learning milestone, we learn something about the idea, and then we can adjust it or decide not to continue it at all. And tasks are the things we put inside Kanban boards or Jira, and there are things that are pretty well managed today. I don't really want to give you another system, but what GIST does is ties these activities that the team is now very focused on to the rest of the stack. So everything we do in the task level is connected to steps, ideas, and goals. Let me give you some tools. This is a broad framework, but these are some immediate tools. So the first thing about goals is to move away from goals that are just about launch this or build that, output goals, and moving into customer-focused goals. So customer-focused goals measure customer behavior. So for example, for this company, how many documents were created? How many documents per active user? You can create a kind of a metrics tree that's different levels of it support the higher levels. And these are things you can build goals around. These are the things you want to put in your OKRs. On the other part of the tree, there's also revenue goals. Revenue is another way that we can measure that we're giving value to customers. But if they are willing to pay to us, that's usually a sign that we're doing something good. So it's important to track both these things to see how they overlap and to use them as the focus. If you can get your company to start using customer-focused goals, you create the infrastructure later to judge ideas in a more objective ways, because the idea that contributes most to the goal is the one we need to pursue, not the idea of the CEO or the idea of that the team likes. Next week, we should move into evidence-based idea decision, and this is really the heart of the GIST system. So first, I suggest to do something that a lot of companies are already doing, and it's using idea banks to collect ideas. It's using I scores. So I stands for impact, confidence, and ease. It's basically 3 numbers in the range of 0 to 10, and you assign these numbers to the ideas. But what I think we should do a bit more is focus on the confidence. Confidence basically answers the question, how sure are we that this idea is good, that it's going to work, that's going to deliver the impact? So how do we answer this question? I struggled with this for a number of years, so I created a tool, the confidence meter. It works a little bit like a thermometer, if you like. It goes from very low confidence to high confidence. How do you go from low confidence to high confidence? By finding evidence. If you find different classes of evidence, weaker evidence, stronger evidence, you can kind of guess or estimate how much confidence you should have in this idea. So just as an example, I have an idea in my hand. I'm super excited about it. I love it. I think it's going to change the world. Then someone comes over and says, okay, what evidence do you have? It turns out all I have is self-conviction. I think it's a good idea, but that's it. That's very low confidence. That will give me a 0.01 on the tool. And why is that? Because every bad idea, someone thought it was a wonderful idea, but it's just not very strong evidence. To move further, I need to do other things. I may need to present it to the team and see what their opinion. That gives me a little bit more confidence. I may need to evaluate it on paper, create a business model, or create some sort of model to kind of measure the impact. And that's a slightly harder test to pass. And a lot of ideas die at this level. Then I can start collecting evidence from the outside. It could be anecdotal, or it could be market data, for example, through surveys or smoke tests. And really the strongest evidence is from tests and experiments. So both qualitative and quantitative, for example, doing a user study with 50 users is pretty strong evidence. If it shows that the idea is a good idea. Doing an A/B experiment, a very successful A/B experiment, is strong evidence. And really, the maximum evidence comes from launching the idea and monitoring it in the wild. By using this system, and this is based on experience, this is not just in theory, you are cutting across a lot of these discussions, a lot of these debates back and forth, which idea is best, my opinion versus yours, here's why we shouldn't do this, here's why this is the most important thing. This question, what is the impact, confidence, and ease, and what evidence do we have, really simplifies a lot of the discussion. And management teams really love this, because managers keep getting pitches and ideas and things, and there's no consistent way to measure these ideas, so they really like this. Next is, how do we obtain this evidence? And here the key point is there are many, many ways to evaluate an idea. Some of them are cheap and shallow, and they give us low confidence, but they're very important to start with. We don't want to go and do an MVP for every single idea. So, and some are more expensive. So I call this the AFTER framework. It stands for assessment, fact-finding, tests, experiments, and release. And basically at each level, you have various methodologies that you can use to validate. For example, initial ICE analysis or assumption mapping are good ways to evaluate an idea early on without actually collecting any data. Then you can go into fact-finding, data analysis, customer interviews, field research. These are all things that you don't build anything, you just collect data to validate the idea. Then you can start testing the idea itself, but initially you don't need to build anything to test the idea. You can do a lot of early smoke tests or Wizard of Oz or concierge tests that actually just fake the idea. As you have more confidence in the idea, you can start building early versions of it, and this is really where a lot of the prototypes and MVPs come in. And then later you build an almost complete version of it and put it in front of users for longer duration of time. And then there are experiments. Experiments are tests that have a control element. So an A/B experiment, for example, and they are even stronger because they really enable you to know that you have a good idea or not with high confidence. But they also are more expensive because they require a lot more data. And finally, even the release itself is a way to validate the idea. You can stop at different points and see what happens. Then we come to the question of tasks. How do we get people to stop obsessing over the tickets or over the cards on the Kanban board and actually connect to all of this? So here's what I learned. They care about the goals, they're nice, but don't expect the developers to be super excited about this. Ideas, product ideas excite them much more, but the steps are really where they get interested. Because steps are short projects, a few weeks long. They always culminate in something that we put in front of real users and we measure results. And it's a very tangible thing that they can work on. Much more tangible than, say, some arbitrary sprint that has just a collection of stories that we want to implement. And this is really where you can pull them in and get them involved. So this tool is called the Gist board. I recommend using it. It could be physical, it could be digital. And you can just bring the team around it once every other week or every week, just before they plan the next sprint, and go over the goals, the ideas, and then on the steps, and make changes on the fly. They really like it, and it really changes the dynamic with the development team. Now, I want to tell you that everything I told you now is not just in theory. These are things that are being used by dozens, maybe hundreds of companies out there. I don't even know all of them. And there are things that actually work. And they are, as I said, going to be the subject of my upcoming book. Now, if you want to learn more, there are a few resources on my site. You just go to itamargilad.com/resources. You find their ebooks, templates for the Gist board and for the confidence meter built as a spreadsheet, slides and articles. And you'll also find ways there to connect with me and contact me, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. Thank you very much, and we have time for questions. Happy to take them now.
Thanks a lot, Itamar, for this great presentation. We've got obviously several questions that people have been voted and upvoted about those questions. The first one from Borja. How do you align the strategy of the company without a kind of roadmap? Meaning that what comes after what? How many people will be needed based on the tools and methodology that you presented?
Okay, that's a great question. So underlying this question is the assumption that in order to assign resources, we need to have a plan, a strategic plan, a roadmap, and then based on the plan, we will allocate resources to different things. And that's really a derivative of this older way of thinking. This is kind of how you did, canned baked beans back in the day.
Yeah.
I think that today we should realize that we cannot really predict. What we should do instead, as a management team, for example, or as product managers, is think what are the opportunities we want to chase. And the strategy is about evaluating these opportunities. It's about trying to validate that there is really a big opportunity there. And the strategy is not a list of big features or big products we're going to build. That's actually wrong in my mind. And the roadmap is about objectives. The roadmap says, here's all the objectives, the user measurable objectives that we're trying to achieve in Q1, in Q2, and throughout the rest of the year. And by avoiding the traps of kind of latching onto some ideas and then building a plan around the ideas, but actually latching on to opportunities and customer needs or customer goals, you actually are able to plan much better in a much more resilient way. Now, I realize this sounds like hocus pocus, and without actually demonstrating it, it's a bit hazy. But believe it or not, this is how a lot of the most successful companies are operating today. They don't sit there and try to map out the next 5 years or next 1 year even, what are the launches that are coming.
Okay, very clear. Thanks for this answer. We've got another question from Maria. People are the most important factor of this system change. How should you help, or what kind of advice could you share with us today to help these people that don't want to change and just want to stay on their position coding without being empowered? How do you work out on the most difficult factor to change in an organization, being people?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would argue that it also applies to managers. It applies to business stakeholders. No one really wants to change. Everyone wants to use what feels safe and comfortable to them. We need to realize that many of these people are not super happy either. I mean, some people are just happy coding, but a lot of people really want to do more. What's really missing today for a lot of developers is a sense of achievement. They just keep churning out these sprints and these stories, and nothing really comes back at them and say, really, there was a success. The users really dig this, users really love it. And most of the time, what we develop is actually not that impactful. So if you are able to solicit them to convince them to try steps. So steps are short projects, and at the end of the step, we have an experiment or a test. And even if the test shows that the idea was not solid, the fact that the test succeeded in showing that is a success. So you create a lot of small successes, all of a sudden there's excitement in there, all of a sudden there's fun, because we are, as a team, as a cross-functional team, working on a short-term project that we just envisioned a few days ago. We just went out and built it, and it's really making a difference. We can see the smiles on people's faces when we put this out there. And I know, again, this sounds very hocus-pocus, but it really changes the dynamic. It really makes them feel that they are connected and that there's more to life than just coding. Now, you will always find those people that just want to sit in a corner and code. And for those people, maybe there are special projects you can give them and leave them out of this all agile framework. But I suggest that for the rest of the people, don't give them any discounts. And I worked with many, many teams that implemented this, and really the resistance usually doesn't come from the development team. They actually like it a lot because it's more scientific, and they're kind of tired of getting these opaque black box requirements from the product manager or whatever. They want to be part of the solution.
Okay, great, interesting. Maybe last two questions. Next one that has been voted by the audience is about, I think, directly linked with the Confidence Meter tool that you developed. The question is basically looking for tips on what's the criteria to spend time on increasing the level of certainty you've got on a specific ID. How do you say what's the factor, what's the level of information that allows you to say, okay, I've got enough validation on this ID, and we're going to put some work and dedicate some time as a team to work on it?
All right, so it's not a 0 to 1. That's the thing. You initially invest almost zero resources, just some of the PM time maybe, or the designer time to just validate it, or maybe the leads are just evaluating it in a room and they spend 5 minutes on the idea. If that shows a little promise, we're willing to go and spend another 20 minutes testing it on paper, or talking to some stakeholders just to verify that there's no risk that we're missing, or to do an assumption map, or to do something a little bigger. If this still shows promise and our confidence is growing every time we do these things, we're willing to involve it, to build a little team and say, let's do a usability study. And in this usability study, we're going to put it in front of 8 people. It's just going to be a very simple interactive prototype. And if that works, we're willing to pull in more resources until finally we reach a point where it's a full-blown project. We're actually building the thing, but by then we know that we're building the right thing. We improved it a lot along the way, and it's very easy to sell. You don't need to go and do a very complicated pitching deck or anything. You just show the evidence to your managers, and everyone's like, just build it. They love it. The users are loving it. Just build it. Of course, this is the happy path. The less happy path is that you discover along the way it's not a good idea, and that's actually even better because you can throw this idea away and move to another one. So it's kind of a gradual ramp up. It's not like let's decide, reach a point where we say we build this or we don't build this.
Okay, very clear. Last question. We've got less than 5 minutes to close this topic and this great presentation. Based on your experience working on different countries and different kind of cultures and company size, what's your? I know that you're working with not only with Spanish companies, but also with companies all around the world. What's unique about Spanish companies? What's the small thing that you detected and you consider that Spanish startups or big corporates doing product are very, that's the best way you can describe to a product friend Spanish culture?
Well, I live in Spain and for a number of years, and I love it here because of the people. I think the people are some of the nicest in the world, and they're so welcoming, especially for strangers like me. And I think that's part of the charm and also part of the challenge, that people don't like to give each other bad news, in a sense. Sometimes when a topic is very problematic, people try to walk around it a little bit. So that's one thing that, as an Israeli, in Israel, we don't walk away from difficult things. We just walk into them very happily. So as an Israeli, sometimes I tell them, you need to really deal with this problem. And that's something that a lot of people really appreciate. And I think I see a lot of things in Spain that really impress me. A lot of startups that are really out there and they're the same level as the best of Europe, the best of the United States, the best of Israel. So there's nothing to feel ashamed about the quality or the culture or anything like that. I think we just need to be in a position where we're willing to just say sometimes things that are less pleasant for some people to hear, and that will solve a lot of difficult problems early rather than later.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I kind of agree, not being Spanish, but being French. I totally agree and by this, this point of view you have on Spanish startups and companies. So thanks a lot again, Itamar, for joining us. As you said before, the book is almost out there. So thanks for all this great presentation and time you gave us during this presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed talking to the Spanish audience or the European audience at large, and hope to do this again soon.
Yeah, we'll organize that for sure in Madrid or Barcelona as soon as we can meet again in other ways than online events. Thanks a lot, Itamar.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.